Welcome to Your Dream Home. It's the title of today. And it reminded me immediately of a time back in the early 80s, actually about 1981, when or it was even before that, it was 1980. My partner at the time and I had just been together a while, and we were living together, and we were thinking about where do we want to live and what would be our dream home. And we sat down and made a list. We talked about indoor and outdoor living. We talked about being in the woods and yet in the city, close enough to get to all of the exciting things that are going on in Atlanta at that time, and to have a space that had plenty of room for my daughter, had plenty of room for us around the house, being in the woods and yet protected and quiet. We imagined a fence around it that would be privacy. We imagined a woods of at least an acre or more, and we forgot about it. We just wrote it all down and thought about it and put it away. And about a year later, we had moved into another place that did not match that description, and we hadn't thought about it again. And we met some people there, a couple, and they said, "Oh, we're building a house over here, and there's a house next to where we're building. Would you like to come look at it with us? Because you would make great neighbors." So we thought, okay, why not? So we went and looked. I'm making this way too long. The short version is we looked at the house, and it was, oh my God, it was a match. All I knew at the moment, and all either of us really remembered, was that whatever it was about this house, it was perfect. So we put a bid in on it without ever looking inside. We didn't look at what it looked like. We didn't know what the interior was. We just knew it was a spectacular example of exactly what we wanted. And then we put the bid in. The realtors came back and said, somebody else has got ahead of you, so we'll put you on the list. We went on with the house we were in. We were in an opportunity to lease purchase. We came up 9 months later, and we were ready to do the lease purchase. And literally 3 days before we were to sign papers, I got a call from the realtors that said, that house is available. It all fell through. We've been working on this for months, and it all fell through. Are you still interested? And we were like, yes, in a moment, in a heartbeat, for sure. And we canceled our purchase rather, of the other house and bought this one. And as I was unpacking, I pulled out the page, or pulled out the notebook that I had taken notes in about our conversation. And I opened and looked at it and went, oh my God, the house we moved into matched everything on our list. No wonder our hearts jumped when we saw it. No wonder we were so excited about it. And we lived there for quite a long time until it didn't match anymore. And then we moved on. So you're finding your dream home can be about the physical manifestation of something you're looking for. It all starts in consciousness. It all starts in the imagination. And that was even before I was in Science of Mind. So I kind of knew that, but I didn't have the specific tools for that sort of expression. And yet our hearts were there. Our anticipation was there. Our expectation that we could have that or close to it. And it showed up. That's one level. That's one part of the whole coming home process. We had both been wandering a lot, and then had come home to each other and come home to that place. And it was wonderful, and it was beautiful. So your dream home may be a place, it may be a building, it may be a particular thing. And if you were looking to manifest that, then I encourage you to make that kind of list. List what you want to feel in every room, what kind of colors, how much indoor, outdoor, what kind of space around it, what kind of resources. How would you feel in every room of the house if it were your dream home, and if that were your dream? I heard a definition years ago when I was working as a therapist, that home is a place where you are loved and known. Not just loved, but also really known and understood. And with all of our foibles and all of our wonderful traits and maybe less than wonderful traits, that we are known and that we are loved. Because if you think about it, that's a place where you can relax. That's a place where you can feel connected. That's a place where feels like perhaps home. Some years before, earlier than that 1980s home demonstration, I went off to college right after my junior year of high school. I'm telling all these stories to illustrate these points, not because I want you to know my life story particularly, but I went off to college right after high school. I went into an early admissions program, and I spent the first semester of my freshman year in college. And then, lo and behold, the administration back in my high school town said, "Oh no, you need to finish your senior year." So much to my chagrin, I had to go back home. And I went back home to finish my senior year. I went from living on my own, making my own decisions, deciding what my schedule would be, getting all of my work done, being successful, very successful in college, and then back to home where I had rigid rules and restrictions. My room was half the size of a dorm room. My space was restricted and constricted, and I really believed, I kept hearing it. That was the 60s. You were hearing it everywhere. You can't go home again. You can't go home again. You can't go home again. And that has been true in many ways. When you think about your external world, if you go back to where you've lived before, back to places that seem to be home, they may not be home to you anymore. They may not feel like it at all. But there's another level, as Maya so beautifully pointed out, there's another level of home that is about the consciousness piece. What we established in consciousness before we manifested our particular house at that time. See, and that spiritual home is what really brings us back. And this whole idea of the hero's journey is about coming back to that home and knowing within us what that home really is. It's like it's like being in this. Well, Ernest Holmes says that it's a state of mind. That home is a state of mind, not a place. He also says that your thought is infinite, your destiny is eternal, and your home is everlasting heaven. Wow. Back in my earlier years in a whole different religious system, I used to sing a lot. This heaven's not my home, I'm just passing through. If heaven's not for me, then what will I do? Well, what I didn't know then and what I now know is heaven is my home. It is your home. And it's not a place, it's a state of mind. It's a consciousness. It's a state of consciousness in which this idea of oneness becomes so real and so full and so present that all stress goes away, all discord and breaking between good and bad and right and wrong. In the old language, we called that the kingdom of God. Nowadays, we just call it the presence of the one. See, and home can be that state of consciousness. Wow. I had another puzzle for myself a few years ago. After becoming a science and mind minister for a few years, I went on a sabbatical between centers. I had finished at one, and I wasn't yet sure where I wanted to go next or what was next. So I took a walkabout around the country, and I wandered all over this country, following my car wherever it took me. Some days, and other days really clear about where I was headed. And the interesting thing about that was I felt so at home wherever I went. Absolutely in place, at home, in the moment. I was on the train up outside of in Colorado, outside of Dahlonega, where wrong city, but anyway, and it was one of these trains. It's a sightseeing up through the mountains. It was gorgeous, and I was sitting next to a couple, and the woman started crying as we were looking at the beautiful scenery. There was snow on the ground. It was amazing. And about the time that happened, we came to a place where we were going to stop and get off for our picnic. And so we did. We got off to picnic. I was by myself. I wasn't with anyone else, except I suddenly found myself with them. And in being with them, I asked what was going on. And they shared with me that their grandchild had just passed away. And they were so grieved, but they had this trip planned and they still tried to go ahead and do it. And, I sat with them, I talked with them, I ministered with them, shared love, shared support, shared ideas, and mostly just listened. And I felt so perfectly in my right place and right time. I couldn't have been more at home anywhere else on the planet. And I kept experiencing that all around this trip, wherever I was. And I kept thinking, I feel more at home traveling and out with groups and out doing other things than I do in my own house. What is that about? Of course, at that point, I didn't have a house. I was jokingly homeless, although I had plenty of places to be home. And what I now know about that is that felt like home for 2 or 3 reasons. One, it was that I was completely focused in the moment. When I'm traveling, when I'm in a new place, when I'm with new people, when I'm in a brand new situation, I am not thinking about the past. I'm not dragging any baggage with me particularly. I'm just focused right here and now in the newness, the excitement of what's new and what's coming and what the day is going to bring and all of that anticipation and joy. And that feels like home. That feels like safety. That feels like being held close and moved in an easy, beautiful, powerful way. So I got to wonder, what is it that really makes up heaven as home? That consciousness of home, that consciousness of heaven. H.B. Jeffrey wrote a book called The Power of Prayer. And in that, he says a whole lot of wonderful stuff. It's an old book, so the language is a little archaic. And you have to kind of translate some of like what he calls the kingdom of heaven. I would call the presence and sovereignty of the power of the one rather than the kingdom. But what he's talking about in this section of the book, that presence is always available to us, that oneness, that power, that safety, that love. And he says, people are not always conscious of the kingdom, and they believe it's far off. Heaven's after we die. Heaven and home may be a place that we aren't at yet because we don't feel so good about where we are. We may still be on the return and we haven't found the home within us yet. But here's what he says. We need only to empty our minds, although he says their minds, to all that is untrue. In other words, I would say to appearances, to what looks like two powers that work in the world, good and bad and evil, to all of that stuff that goes on around us, to seeing any truth in it. We should empty our minds to that which is untrue. We shall refuse to criticize, condemn, or censure. Wow. Stop criticizing, condemning, and censuring. That's a big order for me. I know right and wrong. I know what people ought to do. If they just listen to me, their lives would be just fine. Doesn't mean I could fix mine, but I sure know what I would do to fix yours. We all know how the fallacy of that. It's just not anything that will work. So, but to tackle those three things as a clearing out process, as a letting go, as a no longer holding these things in consciousness or in mind, is a really powerful thing. And then he goes on to say, and they cast off their thoughts of resentment and bitterness, and all of that will cease. They'll no longer carry a chip on their shoulder. And then they'll find out that the divine goodness and bounty is right here at hand. and willing to give you and me and us all that it has. All that it has, willing to give. It's pretty amazing to me that it's that whole business of letting go of the fear, if you think about those things, that criticism, that censorship, yeah, that one, yeah. It's all fear-based. It's about living in fear. And that's what keeps home from feeling like a home, is when we're living in fear. So it's finding ways to let that fear go and to release it. The reading today, and that from the same book that Maya was talking about in her presentation, says that what we do is we release our fear. We no longer cherish fear, because fear is based on the idea that there is a way for us to be separated from the good that God is moving through us. And that's just not possible. Can't be separate, can't be separated. Don't cherish your fear, it says. Because we neither fear nor hate. We come to understand the unity of all life. And that God is a whole different thing. With joy, I enter into the activities of the day. With regret, I remember the events of yesterday. Without regret, not with regret, without regret. I remember the events of yesterday. And with confidence, I look forward to tomorrow, for today my heart is without fear. If you want to find heaven, the consciousness of heaven, the consciousness of home, the life of home, then you got to find a way to let go of your fear. You got to let go of that belief that you're somehow separated, that you can be harmed or hurt or in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing. It's a pretty exciting thing. I'm running out of time, so I need to wrap up here. And that is to simply leave you with a quote. And that is, it may be true that you can't go home again, but it's not true, because in truth, you never left to start with. The power of home, the power of life is right there with you all the time. You never left. We're like the fish swimming in the ocean looking for water. We already got it. It's already in us. We find it by releasing those things which are unlike it and simply recognizing and acknowledging it within us. And then it comes forward and comes forth with love, with power, with prosperity, with safety, with support, with all the goodness that life has for us. Because you see, you and I, just because we're alive, deserve it. We deserve all of it. It is, to use an old biblical quote, the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, to give it to you. And the truth is, it already has. It's already within you. I encourage you to accept it, because you are wonderful, so am I, and so it is. Thank you.